Today, I want to talk about something that I wish someone had been honest with me about before I started. It is what reinventing yourself at 50 years old actually looks like. And it is not the highlight reel version. It is not the inspirational story where everything clicks into place and then you find your purpose. And then the universe, it rewards you for finally being brave. The real version is the one with the doubts, the one with the steep learning curve, the moments that you almost stopped and you almost gave up, you almost pulled the plug, burned the bridge, burn it all down, the unexpected wins that you did not see coming, and then the things that nobody warned you about that you had to figure out by living them. I started this pivot in my life at 50 years old. I am 51 years old now, and I have a lot to say about what that year actually looked like. First, let me talk about the lie, because I think it sets up everything else that I want to say. The lie is that reinventing yourself after 50 years old is either a tragedy or a triumph. Either you are the cautionary tale, the woman who waited too long, who should have figured it out sooner, and who is now scrambling to catch up with everyone else. Or you are the inspiration story, the woman who found herself at 50 years old, who finally has the courage, who has proof that it is never too late. And the truth, the real truth, is that neither of those things is true. It is just a season, and a hard one sometimes. And sometimes it is a very exciting season, a confusing one a lot of time. And the sooner that you stop trying to make it fit into one of those narratives, the sooner you can actually be in it honestly. Now, let me tell you what this past year actually looked like for me. It looked like deciding at 50 years old to show up on YouTube every single day. And it was not because I had everything figured out, but because I was tired of waiting until I did. And it looked like doing that for over 100 days with almost nobody watching, at least not the number I expected. Now, let me be honest about that part. The early days of building something new at 50 years old are extremely quiet, very quiet, because you show up and you put the work out there. And most days, the silence is louder than the response. And you have to decide every single day whether you are going to keep going, not because the results are there, but because the work matters. And it also looked like learning things that I should have known years ago and having to make peace with that. SEO, search engine optimizations, thumbnails, algorithm, content strategy. It seems like there is always something new to learn, like almost every hour. All of those things. And there is a specific feeling that comes with learning things at 51 years old that you wish that you had learned at 30 years old. And it is not shame exactly. It is more like a quiet impatience that you feel with yourself, because you're like, why did it take this so long for me to do? Why did I not start sooner? And I had to keep reminding myself that you started when you started. And starting when you started is not a failure. It is just your timeline. Here's what I did not expect. I did not expect how much I would change in this process. And not just in terms of skills or strategy, but also in terms of how I see myself. Something happens when you commit to showing up consistently for something that you believe in. You start to become the kind of person who does that. And that identity shift from someone who almost starts things to someone who actually shows up, it's quiet. Not a lot of people applaud you at the beginning, and it's not something that announces itself. But one day you look back and you realize that you are not the same person that you were when you started. And I also did not expect how clarifying this would be for me. Because when you put yourself out there and when you actually start showing up and saying what you think, you find out very quickly what you actually believe, not what you thought that you believed or what you were conditioned to believe, what you actually believe. Because when you have to put it into words, into videos, into content that other people can react to, the vague stuff starts to fall away. And what is left is actually the real stuff. The real stuff is your actual perspective in life, your actual values, your actual voice, what matters to you and what doesn't matter anymore. And at 51 years old, finding your actual voice is one of the most freeing things that has ever happened to me. And I also did not expect the specific loneliness of this process. I talk about this in another video, the loneliness of building something when the people around you do not fully understand what you are doing. But I want to say something specific about that loneliness at 50 years old. Most of the people in my world are not building something new at this stage. They are settled. They have found their lane and they are in it. Whether they are happy or not, I don't know. And there is something very specific about being the one who is still figuring out the lane at 51 while everyone else seems to have arrived. It can feel like you are behind. It can feel like you missed something everyone else got and figured out. But here's what I know. Arrived is not the same as alive. And I would rather be in motion, figuring it out, building something, than settled in a lane that was never mine. Okay, so here are the specific things that nobody warned me about, the ones that I had to figure out by actually leaving them. Nobody warned me that it will take longer than I thought to find my voice. Because I assumed at 50 years old, with everything I had lived and learned and built, the voice would just be there. It actually was not. It took months of showing up, of recording videos that did not quite sound like me, of writing captions that fell off in different angles before I started to hear myself in what I was making. And that process is not something that you can rush. You just have to stay in it long enough for the real voice to come through. And nobody also warned me how much I would have to unlearn in this process. I came into this with 30 years of professional habits, ways of communicating in corporate, ways of presenting myself, ways of measuring success, ways of thinking about success. And a lot of those habits that served me very well in one context, they did not serve me at all in this new one. So unlearning is harder than learning because you have to first recognize that the thing that you are doing is not working when it worked for you so long ago. Nobody warned me how much the external noise will try to get in. The algorithm anxiety, the views, the subscriber numbers, the comparison, the watching what everybody else is doing and wondering if you should be doing that too. At 50 years old, I thought I would be immune to that. Well, I was not. And I had to learn the hard way that the external noise, it never really goes away. You just get better at choosing not to listen to it. Nobody also warned me about the gift of all of this, the specific gift of reinventing yourself after 50 years old, which is this. You genuinely stop caring what people think. Not in a reckless way, in a freeing way. You stop giving a flying fuck. That's how I put it. At 51 years old, I do not have the time or the energy to perform for people who are not my people. I know what I believe. I know what I'm building. I know who it is for. And everything else is just noise. Everything else is just distraction. And here's what I know that I did not know when I started. The reinvention is not a destination. It is a practice. It's almost as if it becomes a new habit for you. You do not arrive at the new version of yourself and then you stop reinventing yourself. You just keep becoming. And the becoming, the actual process of it, that's the point. The point is not what you arrive at. And I also know that at 50 years old, it's not starting over. It is starting with. It is starting with 30 years of pattern recognition. It is starting with clarity that only comes from having been wrong and learning from it. It is starting with the knowledge of which rooms drain you and which ones light you up. It is starting with the freedom of not needing everyone to understand you before you move. That is not starting over. That is starting from the strongest position that you have ever been in. And I know now that the hardest part is not the learning curve. It is not the algorithm. It is not the views. It is not the subscriber count. It is not the slow growth in the early days. The hardest part is giving yourself permission to take it seriously, to treat what you are building like it really matters before anyone else tells you that it does. I am 51 years old. And I started this reinvention at 50 years old. And I will be honest with you, it has been one of the hardest and one of the best years of my life. Hard because growth is hard. Growth is hard because showing up when nobody is watching is hard. Because unlearning 30 years of habits is hard. And it's also one of the best because I am the most myself that I have ever been. Because I finally stopped waiting for the right moment and I just started. Because every detour that I took, every pivot, every season that felt like failure, it was actually the setup for exactly this today. And if you are thinking about reinventing yourself after 50 years old and you are already in it, I want you to know something. It is going to be harder than the inspirational stories told you. And it is going to be better than you think at the same time. And you're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Webley, and I want you to drop a comment below and tell me, are you in the middle of your reinvention right now? And what is the hardest part that nobody warned you about? I want to read every single one of your answers. And if you haven't done so already, I want you to hit subscribe because I will see you in the next video.